What's going on, folks? Hope you're having a wonderful night or day. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about Pre-Alpha 6 that we just got done testing out. It was a bit of a wild one. There was a lot to test. There were some issues that were more noticeable than others, I'll just say, but overall it was a pretty good experience. I think the developers got a lot of feedback and a lot to improve on. They did end up delaying the persistence test that was supposed to take place next week, so now it's going to be taking place on the 25th of July this month, so just 7 more days. But yeah, that is probably a result of all the feedback they were getting about certain things, specifically the house plots, which we're going to talk about in just a second. I was playing, as always, with the guild that I'm in, New Imperial Order. Overall, this test was kind of like smaller in terms of population than the other ones have been. There was only about 151 players in the 24-hour peak, and I think by the end of the first day, the second one was either even less or around the same. There was only about 93 people online towards the end, so definitely not as big as the other ones were, but we did have enough people to at least test out some of the things that the developers implemented. So alongside the house plots, which we're going to talk about that in deeper detail in just a second, they also added everyone's favorite medieval animal, donkeys, and they also added the ability to utilize animal power. So they added these power mill sort of things that serve as alternative for aqueducts for terrain that is like too hilly to carry water up and down on. That's the power mill that we can use now. So if we tame donkeys or want to use people, we can actually generate power for other buildings that need automation in place of aqueducts instead. So it's a pretty cool feature. I think that one was one of the better ones that we tested out during this test. We did notice a couple issues with the donkeys when it came to taming them. They seemed to be eating a lot more food than the horses were, and at times were kind of bugged, but I do believe we were able to tame at least one or two of those and tried those out. And now the highlight of the test, and one of the bigger negatives that people were talking about in regards to stuff they didn't like about the changes, was this house plot feature. So beforehand in the previous test, you probably noticed that the houses were smaller in size. They were closer to the size you'd see from like Age of Empires house placement, just like a single entity building. But in this test, the house plots took over the building of the hut, and this was our primary way of building houses. And what happened was that whenever you place the house down, it would create this fairly big fenced in area, where the idea is that if you own the house or you're like pledged to the settlement and you're a part of that household, then you can place like stockpiles and different benches and stuff like that inside that you can access. Other people probably won't be able to, from what I've been hearing. But if you're interested in like blacksmithing or cooking, farming even, you can kind of put these different stations inside your housing area so that you can utilize those. So the house plots are kind of there to give players a bit more agency and make you feel, more useful as an individual. And the concept itself is nice. It's just that in execution it ended up being bad because, one, it's capped out at 3 players. So that means that when you place the house plots down, as opposed to the huts, you have 3 slots. So the moment that 3 people join that, nobody else can sign up for that household. And also when you upgrade them, it doesn't change. So there's only 3 people that can ever live at that house, whether it's tier 2, tier 3, etc. And it takes up a lot of space. So the issue that a lot of settlements were encountering is that this test, there was just not a lot of room to build at all. It was actually pretty insane. So like if you have a group of like 70 players, this test, the most amount of houses you would have been able to most likely build would have been around enough to house like 27 to 30 players, right? Which is kind of a problem long term, especially when we try to get into building these bigger cities and towns and whatnot, especially because of the fact that if you look at this, this is what's known as a settlement marker. So this is what you put down to expand the territory of your settlement. The only thing though is that the gathering pit, which is also known as your town hall, that creates a default like dark blue radius around it, and it's mostly just in that area that you can actually place down those settlement markers, and then the radius that's expanded by those markers you can't put anymore, right? So in the grand scheme of things, you have to be very careful about your placement because you're kind of limited in terms of, especially if you have a big group, where exactly you can place stuff and how much space you'll have by the end. So most likely, even if these housing plots don't change, we'll have to utilize different settlements and make sure that we're spreading people out, because it just won't be really possible, at least in the current state, to have a town that can field at least 70 people. Right, so that was one thing they did get a lot of feedback on. Another thing is that they did introduce a big map this time, so it was about 8 times, 4 to 8 times around there, the size of the previous one, and it did include a border that separated the 2 factions, us being Remnant and then Ancients on the south side and east side, and it did include a border that separated the northern side of the map and southern side of the map as well. So anytime that we traveled down, which we did towards the very end of the test, it would actually go into a new instance. It was very smooth though, I will say. We didn't encounter any crashes or anything like that going across the border, so that was really nice to see. We were able to cross into ancient territory without any stability issues. But I would say that the stability of the test, as far as like the frame rate and other aspects of it, were less than desirable. There were definitely like frame drops. There was massive issues with the water. People were falling into the water and realizing that they weren't drowning, and they got stuck in the water at times. It was kind of hard to get out as well. You had to go, a little bit deeper or to a certain part of the water so that you could actually drown to get out. And horses, we also noticed there was problems going on with that. Occasionally, the horses would just get stuck randomly and be stuck in position. We couldn't move them or anything. We had to use the unstuck command. So there were still some stability issues, even though there were things that I did like about the test. There's definitely some things they'll have to improve on from this one. And overall, for the housing plots in general, the way that I feel about them is that I like the concept. I think that they could have a place in the game. However, I think that if they're going to keep them, it should be something that's optional. So if you're a big settlement, you can choose to go more for the traditional housing that they had before, and be able to place down a lot of different houses, which, by the way, they started at about 1 slot for those houses, but when you upgraded them, they went to 2 and then I believe 3. So you could start out by placing the designated housing zones or whatever you want to do with that and have the smaller houses. Or if you're a smaller settlement, you can elect to go for more of these like housing plot areas that have the individual storage locations and workshop areas. So I think that's a good alternative. Or if they want to, which they have been getting a lot of feedback as well on this, they could just full on remove the housing plots. I'd kind of hate to see all that work go to waste. A lot of times when it comes to testing, I'm kind of against or biased against removing features outright. If they don't work in their current state, maybe they could be evolved into something different, but I'm always of the mind of preferring variety and having more as opposed to having less. And when it comes to the PvP aspect, because this was my first official PvP test that I've ever been in, it was actually a bit anticlimactic because of all the stability issues and server crashes, which, by the way, whenever the servers would crash, anything that you had on you at the time would get deleted. Unfortunately, it was happening quite a few times, so we did end up losing out on some progress for sure at times during the day. And by the end of it, we unfortunately weren't able to really find anybody to get into a fight with. We did try looking for people, but it turned out that we actually ironically passed the ancient war party that was also looking for people. We were like a good half-mile away from each other and ended up passing each other by before the test ended. So that was a bit unfortunate. However, it was great practice in terms of like finding out what would be required for war and for attacking and even just marching in general. Also, we were able to assist with testing the border crossings, so that was a good benefit as well. I will say though, when it comes to wartime and when it comes to marching, having a big group of people that are getting ready to fight, it's very resource taxing. I mean, we almost had about 90 to 100 units of berry food, and we burned through all of them by the time we actually got down there and ready to fight everybody. It was pretty insane. We also weren't able to really accumulate any reinforcement supplies, which are essentially used for when you want to build a forward operating base and be able to respawn at that base if you die. Unfortunately, we had an issue where we had stored them in someone's house, and then the second day when the test began, that house bugged out, so we weren't able to retrieve those goods anymore, and we had to unfortunately destroy it. So overall, it was like not something that we were really prepared for, but it was at least, good practice and good testing either way. As far as everything else though, I was able to get a lot of practice with the building system and get more familiar with like the smithing and different professions like that. Everything did feel pretty smooth. I really like where the smithing system is at. I think it's honestly perfect, if not close to perfect. I really enjoy that system. I do hope still that they introduce the same amount of complexity into like the armor crafting, potentially the farming system. It could, farming's pretty straightforward. So, or like in gaming sense, not in real life sense. I have no idea what that entails, but at least in a game sense, it seems like it's close to where it needs to be, or if not exactly where, except for potentially being able to like till the soil again after you harvest, or ensuring that weeds don't pop up. Maybe that's something that they can introduce. But definitely for armor crafting and other professions, I do hope that they include the same amount of complexity that they have in the smithing system. And I think that the game itself still has a crap ton of potential. I would highly recommend checking out the game for the persistence test if you do manage to make it into the pre-alpha, and make sure to stay up to date on the Discord for when they open up the signups. This time around, I'll try to make a video again. I've been super busy with work these past couple of months, really, so it's been a little hectic and I haven't really been able to create as much content as I really wanted to, but I'll definitely make the best effort for sure, and I highly recommend checking out some streams and videos that came out of this test. And I'm sorry, no, the persistence test isn't happening next week. It's on July 25th, like I said before, but it's going to be really great. I will be streaming around that week. I decided to delay this one because of the unforeseen issues and just planning that I've been doing with my guild. So persistence test is what we're getting ready for. Really excited for it. It's going to be another PvP test, and it's going to be something that should be lasting like all day, all night, and for several days. But overall, that's all I got for now. I'm sure there's like one or two things I probably forgot to mention. The test itself, I think that it was the features that they added, like the donkeys and the animal mills. I love those. The stable building was pretty cool as well. In terms of bugs and stability, it was seemingly, you know, one of the less stable tests, but that's to be expected with them adding a giant map this time around. So it's work in progress, but I have a lot of faith in these devs. I think that they're doing an amazing job. And when you compare this game to other games that are in pre-alpha or have been in pre-alpha in the past, it's already got an extremely good leg forward, but it's probably going to still take some time. So probably still some years away from early access and release, but hopefully sooner than later, because I'm really excited to see this game in its full form. Thank you guys so much for watching for now, though, and I hope you have a wonderful night or day. I'll catch you on the next one.